Today is Tuesday night, so we have some questions have come in to answer. We'll endeavour to do that. Shed some light on the Dhamma, just as we chanted. Reflecting on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta that we just chanted is always a very good reflection, explanation of the Four Noble Truths. And the Buddha said the light of wisdom is brighter than any other kind of light. So when you reflect on the Four Noble Truths, hopefully it brightens your mind up as you have a little bit more understanding of the way things are. So the first question is, Lumpur, can you kindly talk about mental proliferation, please? Mental proliferation, it's a term you hear all the time when meditators are talking about their state of mind. And it refers to the diffuse nature of thinking, the thinking mind spreading out in all directions, as it were, or just endlessly thinking seemingly without stopping, without restraint, without mindfulness. So, what is the cause of mental proliferation? If you take the Pali term, it's papancha, and that's caused by craving, conceit, views, ditthimana, tanha ditthimana. So Ajahn Chah would talk a lot about people's ditthimana. You attach to views, and that feeds all kinds of uncontrolled thinking. When your view is challenged, or when something agrees with your view, then you think in a more positive way maybe. And when something challenges your view, your mind thinks all about it, argues, maybe internally, or it may lead to external arguments with other people as well. Mana is conceit, so it's self together. Ditthya mana becomes self-view. And then craving is wanting. As we just chanted, you're wanting to get things that you haven't got and wanting to get rid of things that you have got that you don't like. So these are a potent mix that leads on to mental proliferation in the mind. When you come to practice meditation, that's probably the first thing you notice is how much mental proliferation is going on in your mind, how much you're thinking, overthinking, or thinking without mindfulness and wisdom, fed by craving, conceit, views, or self-view. So in shorthand we say the sense of self. So if you live in a forest monastery with a teacher like Lumpur Cha, then your self-view is always being kind of tested. Sometimes the teacher tests you to see how much self-view you have, how much pride, conceit, attachment to views you have. So you get all the stories, people living with Ajahn Chah, and maybe a monk comes to stay in the monastery and he just wants to meditate, because many people are introduced to Buddhist meditation through retreats. They may do 10-day retreats or other kinds of retreats where they do lots of sitting and walking meditation in silence and just meditate and do nothing else. And they become very kind of attached to that way of practice. And then they come and stay in a monastery, like Ajahn Chah's monastery, and they do some group meditation, but then there's also other things you have to do according to the Vinaya, the training in the discipline. So you may have to go out on alms round every day and help with cleaning up, chores around the monastery, and you have to respect the teacher, listen to the teacher, follow the teacher's instructions, and sometimes the teacher instructs you to do things that are not in line with your views, and so your sense of self rebels and starts complaining, and you get mental proliferation. So Ajahn Chah would sometimes make people do things they didn't want to do so they could see their craving and self-view. Nothing too extreme, or it's not in the way of somebody who is bullying, but simply doing things that sometimes triggered people's self-view so they could see it. So get them to sit meditation a bit longer than they wanted to, or get people to work when they'd rather sit meditation, or get them to sit meditation in a hot place so they really see their mind complaining, or sometimes make monks sit meditation before the meal. And one of the times you'll really see mental proliferation kick off, take off, is when you're hungry and tired and you want to eat, but you're not able to eat your food because you have to wait for the senior monk to begin the meal. That's our training. You don't just eat when you want to eat, you wait for the senior monk to start eating, then you eat. So Ajahn Chah is talking a long time with lay visitors, people who are kind enough to bring the food, and the monks all have to wait before they can eat. Then there may be a lot of mental proliferation going through your mind. Why can't I eat? I want to eat. Why is he talking so much? Who are these people anyway? On and on it goes. So fed by conceit, self-view, and attachment to views and opinions about the way things should be. Of course, in any other aspect of life, these are at play as well. So where the people often have the most mental proliferation is where they have their most attachment, their strongest attachment. So at work it may be you're attached to your view about who you are and what you expect from your workplace and how other people should be and your boss should be. Or in your family you have your wishes for your family life and what you expect your home to be like and your partner to be like, or your children to be like, and these things, because of strong self-view, trigger mental proliferation all the time. So often it's synonymous with stress. Stress is like endless thinking, uncontrolled thinking. That's what mental proliferation is. Interestingly, the word in Thai for mental proliferation is prung deng, chit prung deng. And the word prung deng, you can use that with making food, say. You bring a group of ingredients together and put them together and you make a dish, a curry of food, say. And that's another aspect of mental proliferation, is you've got all these ingredients, your craving, desires, and you've got information, the attachment to your perceptions, what you think is good, bad in life, the details of your past experience, and then your worries and anxieties about your future experiences, what may or may not happen, so that all of this is in the mix. So it's in the pot of your mind, and this is where mental proliferation is fed and kept going, just like making a curry and keeping it boiling and keeping it going and then tasting it and adding this and adding that. We're always adding a bit more to the mix through our thinking, through our attachments. And so mental proliferation continues. So what is the antidote? Well, number one always is mindfulness. Bring your mindfulness up. And so we have meditation objects to help do that. To bring up mindfulness on the breath, in and out breath, will start to cut down, reduce the mental proliferation, or even end it sometimes when your mindfulness is very strong. Or recite the word Buddho. You just keep reciting Buddho And you could say that any meditation object is also a form of mental proliferation, except for it's very wholesome and it's just one thing. The sensation of the breath, the recitation of the meditation word Buddho, for example. Your mental proliferation is just centered around one thing. So it is mental proliferation, but in a very wholesome and direct way. So it's much easier to guide the mind, keep it where you want. And so that kind of mental proliferation brings the accompanying feelings of pleasure, contentment, rapture, the factors of samadhi. Whereas the mental proliferation of uncontrolled thinking, stressful thinking, without mindfulness, without wisdom, does the opposite. It takes away your feelings of contentment, rapture, bliss, and you become mentally tired, exhausted, frazzled, frustrated, fed up, miserable, suffering. Mental proliferation, unguided by mindfulness and wisdom, leads to suffering. It increases your ignorance. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle. This is what we call the paticca samuppada. And you give in to unmindful mental proliferation fed by attachment to perceptions and feelings and all the details of your experience, all the thoughts. That feeds more unawareness, ignorance, back to avijja, which feeds more of the karma, making productions of the mind, and more mental proliferation. It goes round in circles. Whereas bringing up mindfulness interrupts this process, slows it down, pauses it, and even stops it altogether. When you become very one-pointed, you're stopping. And that's one way the Buddha described it. When you practice mindfulness, it's like somebody who's been running and then they slow down and they start jogging and then they start walking and then eventually they come to a standstill through the power of mindfulness. But it takes a while, just like those ocean liners that take a while to stop because they're so heavy and they're traveling through the ocean, and the captain presses the button or pulls the lever to stop the thing, but it won't stop for 5 kilometers or something. It's so heavy, there's inertia. Mental proliferation is like that, isn't it? You start practicing mindfulness and your mind will keep proliferating and fighting and struggling and thinking for a while, and then gradually the mindfulness comes up stronger and makes your mind firmer, and you may achieve some stillness, and the mental proliferation gradually fades out. So mental proliferation is usually considered a sign of stress, suffering, something unwholesome. It doesn't mean to say all thinking is unwholesome. So we also can use the proliferating nature of the mind to direct the mind to think or wisely reflect on certain themes of Dhamma, and that's sometimes a way you train your mind. You direct it to think about wholesome subjects. And that can also bring up mindfulness, understanding, and it's using the basic desire of the mind to think, because we're so used to thinking. You can use thought to understand things. You can train the mind in wise thinking, wise reflection. And that is a useful way to deal with mental proliferation, especially when your mindfulness is a bit weak, where you direct your mind to consider a wholesome issue, wholesome theme of Dhamma, and that also can help you to bring it under your control. So if anyone who practices meditation, and I'd recommend to do so, will know about mental proliferation and its dangers and the problems of dealing with it and how frustrating it is, but don't give up, because we can train this mind with effort over time. Another question, Lumpur, how do I deal with anxiety before any important event in my life? Well, much the same as the last question. Most questions have the same answer. Mindfulness. Bring the mind up to mind. Bring mindfulness up. Bring the mind to be mindful in the present moment. Straight away, whatever it is that is causing you anxiety, the feeling, it'll be partly a feeling, unease, discontent. Maybe it's based on expectations, worries about the future, what may happen, or the importance of something kind of puts you under pressure. So you have an uneasy feeling, and then you have perceptions that are triggered. So perceptions of what could go wrong, or the consequences of this event that's coming up. You create stories and pictures in your mind that add to the tension and the pressure or the anxiety. And then there's mental proliferation again. So bringing up mindfulness again can slow that down and help you to get to know what's happening in your mind, understanding the process, how a lack of mindfulness and awareness and understanding can feed the anxiety, make it worse. And you have something coming up, an exam, a test, a job interview, an important meeting, or some difficult thing to do with your health. You've got tests for your health and you have to get something done, or surgery or whatever. So you have something coming up, and before it's happened your mind is already filling in the blanks. And often we paint the worst case scenario first in our mind. Partly it's our deeply ingrained instinct, survival instinct. We're always concerned about danger, brings up fear. Whatever's a danger to us, whatever's a problem to us, we're already thinking ahead just to see if we can deal with that danger, plan for it, avoid it. But with that, often we get fear, anxiety. So there's different approaches. One is just the basic mindfulness approach, as I was saying, bring mindfulness up with a meditation object. Go to the breath, breathe in, breathe out, and already you're bringing your mind to the present moment and calming and conditioning it in a skillful way, rather than thinking with thoughts of anxiety about the problem or what may happen and the worst sort of things that can happen. Just bringing to the mind, to the present moment with the breath. And so some of that mental proliferation or the feeling of tension will start to subside, quickly or slowly, depending on its strength and also depending on your effort in bringing up mindfulness. Sometimes you can use particular meditation objects, such as metta, goodwill, developing the thought of goodwill for yourself, bringing that up as a very powerful feeling to help relax you, and it will tend to lead on to positive thinking. So goodwill for yourself, goodwill for others. So say you do have something that's making you anxious, but it's involving other people. So you're anxious about a meeting with other people, or you're anxious about something to do with your health, and you have to meet doctors and people and so on. If it's to do with other people, well, you can spread your metta out from yourself first and then out to other people. So whoever is involved in this potentially anxious situation or job or event that's coming up, well, you send metta out ahead of you. Think about all the people involved. May they all be well, free from suffering. May you be free from suffering. And it brings up a good feeling to counter anxiety. Anxiety is coming from ignorance, lack of awareness, lack of understanding, lack of mindfulness. If you mindfully bring out a very wholesome theme of Dhamma, you're doing the opposite. You calm your mind down, you bring up a good feeling that helps you to let go of the bad feeling, the tension. So focusing the mind, bringing out mindfulness, or focusing the mind on something very positive, very calming, and particularly bringing up goodwill, that can help. Another one we can develop is just wise reflection, wisdom. Reflect on the uncertainty of things. Just as the worst thing could happen, and that's where your anxiety is coming from, maybe you're worrying about what may happen, what the outcome that may happen. Well, the best thing can happen too. There are many outcomes ahead in our life that we can't predict and can't control. So if your habit is to think of the worst and feel anxious about what's happening, what may happen, well, you can also bring your mind to think about what may happen in a good way, or that just to accept that maybe it won't be as bad as you think. It could be worse. These simple little phrases can help us in those times when we're anxious, afraid, depressed. Things could be worse. Sometimes you reflect back on past experiences and you can learn from that. You say, well, say for example you've got to have surgery, but you've had some surgery before and it went okay. We say, well, before it went okay, hopefully this time it will go okay. Or if you're anxious about getting on an aeroplane, or if you've flown before, you say, well, I've flown before and it was okay, so this time hopefully it will be okay. If you're having a meeting, you can reflect back on past meetings and focus on those meetings that went well, successful, where you can repeat that. Sure, you have to learn, and sometimes we do make mistakes, but you can also appreciate what has gone well for you in the past, and you build on that. If you're doing an exam, it may well not be the first exam you've ever done in your life, so if you've done previous exams and got through them and fine, well, this exam, there's a good chance you'll get through it as well, and you just repeat what you did last time. You do your practice, your preparation, your revision, and use the wisdom faculty to think it through, give yourself some wise reflection, and also cut down those thoughts that are just seeing the worst outcome. So you say, oh, what if I fail my exam? Yeah, well, what if you don't? Sure, there's always a possibility you'll fail your exam, but there's also the possibility you'll pass. You may even pass well. You can use your mind in this way to teach yourself not to just focus on what's bad or frightening or the cause of anxiety. You look at something more positive, and you manage your expectations and your preparation in this way for things that are coming into your life. So mindfulness, positive emotions like goodwill, and then wisdom, all these three things will help you. Another question, Lumpur, what is the difference between asavas and kilesas? Thank you. Asavas have a few different translations, but they mean the outflows or the effluent of the mind. So we often think of sewage. Like here in the monastery, we don't have a town sewage system. We are in the country, in the forest, so we have our own sewage system or effluent system. And we watch how all the toilets go down into a pit, and then there's a bit of purification going on. There's a clarification, purification system, and then they pass out the semi-clean grey water into the bush. So we contemplate effluent as outflows, sewage coming out from people. They eat and drink, and then there's sewage coming out the other end. That's the effluence. And we have mental effluence, so we absorb objects all the time. We see, hear, taste, touch, smell, because we still have ignorance, lack of mindfulness, and we have attachments and sense of self. Then all these objects we absorb then lead on to effluence. We like things, so that's one form of effluent. Effluent is what we call dharma, asava, the desire for pleasurable sense objects, sight, sound, taste, smell, touch. We think about them, we want them, we seek them out, and this is asavas of sensuality, dharma, asava coming out. And then of course that also can trigger aversion when you don't get what you want. So you want something and then you don't get it, so that also is an effluent. Aversion, annoyance, irritation, didn't get what I want. And then another outflow is bhava. So bhava is becoming. We want to become something in life. We want to be somebody, be something. We want to get certain experiences, and we want to live. That's another, obviously, deeply ingrained asava. We want to live, and so we do all kinds of activities and actions because we want to live, and we want to live well, and we want to live in the way we desire. We're ambitious, and we have our ideas and desires of what we want from life, which leads to outflows from the mind. Actions, thinking, action, speaking, action, all the time. Which is different from, say, one who's what they call kinasava, one who has quelled the outflows, abandoned the outflows and the effluence from the minds. That's the arahants. They have no more of that, so they don't want to be anything. They don't attach to the world, and they don't attach to sight, sound, taste, smell, touch. They don't get angry, they don't have desire and wanting. Their mind is still, pure, peaceful, without the asavas. They don't have ignorance anymore, conditioning the mind. That's another asava. Because they're mindful and wise, and they've purified their mind of ignorance. So they no longer create a self in their experience. If there's no self, then there's no outflows into the world, because there's no self producing anything. So asavas are really synonymous with kilesas, but as we know, the Buddha talked about the causes of suffering, kilesa, in many different ways. So he talked about the 60 upa-kilesas, a list of different kinds of kilesas. We always shorten it down to greed, anger, delusion, or greed, hatred, delusion. But then greed, hatred, and delusion can be expanded into other kinds of their offspring. So like stubbornness and apathy and arrogance and conceit and anger, mild irritation, and then strong anger and hatred and cruelty and so on. But rooted in greed, anger, delusion, these are kilesas, but then they have their different manifestations. And they're really also manifestations of asava, but it just depends how the Buddha was talking about kilesa, in what context. And when you talk about the same things over and over again, often it's useful to have a few different angles, different descriptions of the same things, just to help people look at them from different ways, different perspectives, so they get to know them better. So we have different descriptions of these mental defilements. We have sangyojanas, the fetters. We have the nivaranas, the hindrances to meditation. We have the floods, the yogas. And we have the bonds, the yogas. And there's all these different ways of describing defilement. It's all rooted in greed, anger, and delusion. They're all the cause of suffering. they're all to be abandoned. What did we just chanted this tonight? The Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta describing the Four Noble Truths. What did the Buddha say to do with mental defilement is abandon it. Why? Because mental defilements defile. They dirty, sully, or blemish the mind. So sometimes the Buddha would say, the mind is like white cloth. When it's pure, peaceful, it's like a pure white cloth. But then the defilements come along, it's like specks of dirt on this pure white cloth. So you want to wash or clean off the dirt. That's the process of abandoning defilement, because they defile the mind. They produce suffering. The best mind of all is the mind without defilement. The more defilement we have, the worse off we are. The more we suffer, the worse our mind is. The less we can think, the less creative we are, the less kind we are, the less productive we are, the less happy we are. So defilements are defilements. They take away our happiness and our peace. So they are to be abandoned. Now it's just a few thoughts on asavas and kilesas. Another question. What advice would you give to somebody who is suicidal? Well, simplest advice would be don't do it. Try to see the value of life. Life, however bad it is, there's always opportunities to improve, change things for the better. And one of the reflections you develop as you meditate, and particularly as you develop kindness, compassion through your practices, you see yourself and others as the same, and we learn to value all life. So sometimes we have this feeling, well, I wouldn't hurt anyone else, but me, I own this body, I own my own life, so it's up to me what I do. Well, of course it is, you've got your own choice there, but you're also one life. So just as you wouldn't kill another person, why kill yourself? Of course we get into situations where we're angry, depressed, fed up, sometimes it's in a lot of pain through illness or some kind of crisis, disaster. But the way out is to learn, patiently learn and bring the mind up again, rather than destroy yourself, hurt yourself physically, take away your life. Because that thought is a really strong, powerful, negative thought that doesn't end with the act of killing. If you were to be successful killing yourself, that thought goes on. It's a delusion. The thought to commit suicide is a delusion. You think you'll end your suffering, you'll end it all, end your suffering. But it's not the end. And that thought is such a powerful thought, it'll re-emerge in your consciousness in the future. So generally, you see the habits of mind when people are becoming suicidal. They have their problems, their suffering, and they think, I'll end it by killing myself. One thing, they're deluded because they don't realize they won't end it. And two, it's kind of a cycle. They just keep going to that same point, and then if they don't consider it more deeply, and then maybe they don't get good advice, then every time they become caught up into extreme suffering, they always think this is the way out. Oh, if I kill myself, that's the end of it. I'll stop it. And so sometimes you get, attempted suicide and do it once, not successful, but they keep returning to that same point. So it's very cyclical. Becomes a very deeply ingrained habit, and is a very negative, unwholesome thought because it's killing. What we want to try and do is bring up the sense of valuing life, remembering, the Buddha gave those teachings, explaining how rare it is to be born as a human being. It's your chance to really do good for yourself. It's precious, human life. Other people's life is precious, our life is precious. we should try and use it to develop the path for the end of suffering. So developing sila, samadhi, panya, do more good. However bad things are, there's always a way up again. But we just have to be willing to be patient, take good advice, go through the difficulties and see what we need to do to improve. So, simple answer, don't do it. The last question tonight. How can we practice as a lay person during the upcoming range retreat? Well, it is a useful chunk of time, 3 months. It's based around the monastic range retreat for monks and nuns all over the Buddhist world, where they don't travel much for 3 months. They just stay in one place, practice Dhamma, learn new things, learn chanting, learn suttas, learn the Dhamma, meditate a lot, learn the Vinaya, keep the rules, practice, just put more effort into the practice. And sometimes monks and nuns will take on special practices for the 3 months of the range retreat. So they may limit their eating. So we have practices like we say, we just eat what we get in our alms bowl. We only eat at one sitting. So only once a day. That's a very commonly practiced thing. Eat once a day and just eat in one vessel, the alms bowl. No extra plates, cups and stuff or food. Some people will, in the monasteries, will take on practices like staying up all night once a week on the observance day, not lying down. Occasionally people take on not lying down for 3 months. That's quite tough. And so on. People take on special practices. They make determinations. I'm going to sit meditation, walk meditation for so many hours every day and stick to it. They make a plan, kind of schedule for themselves. And whether they feel like it or not, they just stick to that schedule as a way of bringing up energy, effort, patience, resilience in the practice. So you can take what the monks and nuns do as an example, and you adapt your own practice in your own lay life according to your situation. So you may determine for 3 months I'm going to keep the 5 precepts really diligently, or maybe even keep the 8 precepts for 3 months, or maybe for 1 day per week of the 3 months. And then you may take on practices like, if you're new to meditation and you want to learn, you want to improve your meditation, you may say, I'm going to meditate for at least 10 minutes every day for 90 days, for 3 months. And you stick to it. It becomes a resolution you stick to. If you're a more experienced meditation, maybe you do it for 1 hour a day, or even 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. You take on practices that you can do, and you're looking to improve your commitment and your skills in the practice. So extending length of time meditating, or just keeping up regular meditation. Practicing dana, generosity. So if you live near a place where you can go and offer food to sangha, that's a good thing to do. Daily or weekly, or at least monthly maybe. But you can also do dana in other ways. So if you can't go physically to a place to offer dana, you can maybe do some charity online, or charity donations, or voluntary work, or you can adapt. So maybe you do some dana in a way that is helping somebody, but without going anywhere if you're unable to go. So you could make something for somebody. Do a favor for somebody, or you have to be creative depending on your situation, and you use this as a time to do something, put more effort into the generosity, the charity that you do maybe. So you can put more effort into charity, generosity, precepts, meditation, listening to Dhamma, chanting. It's a time people learn a new chant by doing it every day. So the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta that we chanted tonight, that's a good one to learn. And if you chant it every day for 3 months, you may well have learned it off by heart, simply by repetition. And it's a form of meditation, both samatha meditation, where you bring up mindfulness, calming the mind, and vipassana, because you take the meaning and you start looking into, contemplating impermanence, say, and letting go of craving and attachment. So learning verses of Dhamma, suttas, recitations, different chants, that can be a very good thing to do. And you can be creative in the way you use your time, taking on new practices, helping people, meditating, listening to Dhamma, introducing it into your daily routine more than before. And saying, this is the vasa, I'm going to do it. And of course some people go on retreat, so they say, it's 3 months, I'm a layperson, but I'm going to go and stay in a monastery for 3 months or 1 month or whatever you can do. Some people will even take temporary ordination, become a monk or a nun for 3 months if it's possible. And there's so many things we can do to upgrade our practice and our effort. So it's a time you can use this period for that purpose. And you maybe just have to think about where you can improve your effort in the practice, and then apply that. Try and stick to it. Stick to whatever you take on for 3 months. Stick to it. Don't do it for 3 days and give up. So if you are making a resolution to do something more than usual, well, try and make it realistic, something that you can do. Maybe you make a rule about how many hours you're going to sleep at night, or how many meals you'll have per day, or how many hours you'll meditate, and so on. You learn and you see what you can do to improve your practice. I often mention the practice Ajahn Chah once recommended to a couple who argued a lot and had their problems with their own irritation and anger coming up in their life. So he said to become mindful of your anger for 3 months, you can do a practice. If any day you become angry and you display it in your speech, your actions, and you become aware that you've given into your anger, get a little pebble and put it in a jar. And you have to be honest. But of course, if you're really training yourself sincerely, you have to be honest. So every time you're giving into your anger, it's not like just a passing thought, but if you say something in anger or do something in anger, or have an argument or whatever, put a pebble in a jar just to make you mindful of how often you give into your anger. And then see at the end of 3 months how many pebbles you've got in your jar. Some people need a big jar, some people need a little jar. So this couple did it, husband and wife did it, and at the end of 3 months they brought their jar out. They kept it secret. At the end they brought it out, and one jar is full of pebbles, one jar is half full of pebbles. The husband's was full of pebbles and the wife's was half full. And the husband looked at the wife's jar and said, "Wow, there's so few pebbles in there. I think you've been lying. You're not doing it properly. You weren't being sincere. You're just trying to prove that you don't get so angry. I think you're cheating." And he started arguing with his wife, and his wife just turned to him and said, "Well, you should put another pebble in your jar now because you got angry again." So it can be like that. You find a practice that helps you to be more mindful of various mental defilements, asavas, kilesas, in some way or other, to do with food, money, anger, greed, laziness, sleepiness, whatever. See what you can do. So that's the end of tonight's questions. So we'll wish you well in your practice, and See you again next time. May the blessings of Buddha Dhamma Sangha guide you and protect you.